Hi, welcome to Ms. Richardson's U.S. History 5-Minute Lectures. This information will be U.S. Notes 5.15, Horrors of the War, Shift Public Opinion. It includes information that aligns with the second section on your Unit 5 study guide. Now remember to use your study guide to help you take the notes. You have control over this, so pause when you need to be able to write things down and understand what's being said. Let's go ahead and get started. So as you learned in the last set of notes, many of the young men fighting the Vietnam War were unprepared for the realities of war. The brutality and horrors that they saw every single day affected them in many ways. And because the news media was there covering Vietnam for TV viewers every night, many of the horrors and atrocities of war were sent right into American homes. And it was really the first time people had this kind of view of what war was. One wartime event that started to cause Americans to question whether or not we should be in Vietnam was the Tet Offensive. This action occurred in January and February of 1968, and it caused many mainstream Americans to begin to doubt that the U.S. should be involved in the war. The Tet Offensive was a surprise attack by the Viet Cong and the North Vietnamese on strategic South Vietnam towns and bases. It was coordinated so that the attacks occurred quickly, and the South and the U.S. were not prepared. So Tet's a Vietnam holiday, and the Southern troops were not expecting active fighting at that time, and initially were surprised and pushed back and were losing. So the U.S. was able to very quickly regroup and push the Northern troops out of the area they attacked. However, this made the Tet Offensive a military win for the U.S. and the South, but when Americans viewed this from home, they saw massive losses of life, unprepared troops, and they felt like there was no real hope of winning. So a lot of Americans began to shift their opinion and shift their support from the U.S. should be in the war to we shouldn't be there. And then a much more horrific action occurred, and it influenced public opinion even more. And this action is known as the My Lai Massacre. While it was not immediately revealed to the public, once Americans heard about what happened here, they were horrified. And this really shifted people from thinking we were doing the right thing to questioning what was happening. In March of 1968, the U.S. troops entered this village, My Lai. The Americans knew that the Viet Cong and the enemy troops were heavily entrenched in this specific area, and in the previous weeks, a lot of U.S. troops had been killed and injured by the enemy in the area. So these troops believed they were stationed here, and they were receiving help from My Lai, and so My Lai was a search and destroy mission. And the troops, remember, high tension, very angry about what's been happening, scared, and so it starts as a search and destroy mission. So search for enemy troops, clear out the village, destroy the village and livestock. With these feelings that existed between the two groups, the simple mission literally turned into a massacre of the villagers by the American troops. Once it was revealed in November of 1969, more than a year later, soldiers just claimed to have been following orders. They were told to do this. Now, while this happened, between 347 and 504 men, women, children, and infants were raped, killed, and mutilated in this attack. We don't have exact numbers. We don't know how many there were. The public was outraged, and 26 soldiers were tried for war crimes, but there was only one conviction, and that was the lieutenant in charge in the field who said he got his orders from others, but they couldn't prove that. So not every soldier there participated in the massacre of the villagers, but Americans were horrified about what this war was doing to their sons and the young men of their country who would do these kind of things, whether someone told them to or not. So some Americans were already upset about the draft, about the undeclared war happening, and then these actions occurred, causing even more Americans to stop supporting the war. Other events and actions followed, like Kent State, the revelation of the Pentagon Papers, and the War Powers Act of 1973. So we'll talk about all of those in class, so I'll promise you'll know what they are by the end of the unit. But then we add on top of that the Tet Offensive and the My Lai Massacre, and that influenced opinion against the war, changing leadership in the U.S., and ultimately influenced U.S. policy in regard to the Vietnam War. You'll learn more about that in your next notes because this is the end of U.S. Notes 515. Make sure you bring your questions to class.